Okay, I think it's time we finally talk about Dan Schneider. Hey guys, what's up? It's Imurgency and welcome back to my channel. And today, in light of the recent docu-series that's come out on HBO called Quiet on Set, we're going to be talking about the historic exploitation of child actors in Hollywood, and looking specifically at Dan Schneider, who has been hailed historically as the king of children's entertainment from like the 90s to early 2010s. And if you've been on the internet, specifically the deep dive side of the internet, you have probably come across a Dan Schneider deep dive video talking about the darker side of both Nickelodeon and of child stardom. I've also made previous videos talking about this topic, specifically having to do with Jeanette McCurdy when her memoir came out, and how she spoke on her experience being a child actor, and how Dan Schneider allegedly impacted her life and her trajectory. But again, what really inspired this video was the docu-series Quiet on Set, because I feel like it was very eye-opening for a lot of people, because this is one of the first times that we've seen an actual docu-series, like an official investigation deep dive on this topic in a traditional media platform. Like prior to this, a lot of discourse around Dan Schneider, around Nickelodeon, and around child actors and how they've been treated has been carried out through social media, whether they be through comprehensive video essays, TikToks around speculation, or from different whispers around the internet. This is an official project that has been put out that has direct sources, like actual then child actors that had been involved with Dan Schneider, had been involved with the entertainment industry as a young person, and were recounting their experiences throughout this docu-series. And while watching through this docu-series, I feel like two of the main emotions that I felt were anger and guilt. Anger because it was really hard seeing these child actors be exploited time and time again, seeing even the adults involved in the production be exploited, whether that be from the women that worked with and for Dan Schneider, having to split the salary of one person between two people, the almost daily massages that Dan Schneider allegedly expected from the female workers in his productions, and of course all the inappropriate and uncomfortable jokes, scenes, and innuendos that were riddled throughout his shows as we were growing up. And where the guilt comes in is purely from the fact that now knowing what we know now, I feel like a lot of our childhoods were a lie. In the sense that for a lot of Gen Z, we grew up on these shows. Maybe not all the ones that were cited in the docuseries, like the Amanda Bynes show and all that, because I feel like that was a little bit before my time. But in terms of like the iCarlys, the Victoriouses, the Drake and Joshes of it all, we were there for that. And looking back at it now, I sort of feel guilty for enjoying these shows as much as I did, knowing what we know now and understanding what these kids were going through for the sake of our entertainment and for the sake of their careers. So in this video, we're just gonna talk about the series, the show, Dan Schneider. We're just gonna talk about the situation and then break into Dan Schneider's response to the docu-series, which I can just say right now is lackluster at best. So really quick, if you're new to the channel, then definitely subscribe, leave a like on this video, and follow me on my socials at Imurgency on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. So like I was mentioning before, I really feel like a lot of our childhoods through these shows was a lie. Just because while everything seems so hunky-dory, like so aspirational, everyone wanted to be at Hollywood Arts, everyone wanted to be on iCarly, everyone wanted to be on these shows, both in the universe and then also like in real life. I feel like everyone at the time of these shows airing was like, oh my god, I could be a Victorious kid, like I could be on this show, I could be an actor, let me hit up the radio stations that are having casting calls. Well, in reality, things were bad. Things were really bad. And we had inklings that things were bad. Like of course you hear about the whole child star gone bad pipeline, like all the child stars that seemingly went off the deep end randomly, and having no explanation as to why they end up that way. Well, we have more context now as to why that is through this documentary, because we have examples like Amanda Bynes, Demi Lovato, Drake Bell, and many more who were child stars, who all started off as child stars and then had their moments where they were fighting these very real demons that have altered their lives forever. And then a lot of times the missing piece of the story that people tend to not address or tend to forget is the fact that yeah, the show may be over, but the trauma, the unhealthy coping mechanisms, and the lifestyles that these literal children were in at the time of them filming stays with them. So whether that be from substance abuse, unhealthy coping mechanisms, or just other unresolved trauma, that is what these people are walking away with and having to combat well into their adult lives. And one of the main and more shocking examples of this from the show was Drake Bell. And words cannot express how absolutely gagged I was when he first hopped on this docuseries, because in the lead up to it, they kept having murmurs about how one child actor was actually abused pretty harshly, and having the other former child actors trying to place who that child actor could have possibly been that was abused, only to have Drake Bell appear gaggy, because I would have never expected. I don't think anyone would have ever expected. And the fact that this was kept so low-key for so long honestly speaks to the level of trauma that Drake had been going through. And it's really sad because Drake Bell should have never, ever should have never gone through anything. Drake Bell should have never even been put in a situation where something like that could have happened. Like, there should have been protections in place where grown adults can essay and otherwise abuse on and off the sets of a workplace. And I feel like a lot of it just comes back to the whole cost of fame, especially when these workplaces in entertainment have historically not valued children's safety. Like, there should have been no world where the man that abused Drake Bell, who was known to be creepy and weird, had a whole shrine and pieces and conversations with an incarcerated serial killer, should have been allowed anywhere near children. And especially not after going to jail. Like, that is ridiculous. Like, there is no reason that man should have been allowed on a set and continued to be on a set, because I think he went to go work at Disney after he got found guilty for all the things that he did to Drake Bell. Like, there should have been more screenings to keep weirdos and pets from being on sets with children, and honestly just people in general, to be honest. And I'm not sure how different things are nowadays in terms of regulations and screening and who is allowed on sets, but it's clear as day that nothing like this should ever be allowed to happen again. And all this is to say that even throughout this docuseries, we've only heard from a few voices talking about the traumatic things that they have gone through. And I just know for sure that these aren't the only people that have been affected that have gone through things. They're just the ones that are comfortable right now with sharing their story. But the fact that the stories among the people that have come out are so consistent and have such a through line should really be concerning, because we really failed a whole generation of child actors. Well, I mean, we didn't necessarily fail as like the people watching it, because we were kids at the time. There's nothing we could have done. But the people that were in charge at that time, the people that were supposed to be adults and were supposed to be looking out for these child actors, failed an entire generation of them. And if this many people can be impacted by this section of entertainment. And I want to say really quickly in regards to my last point, I really respect everyone's choice to come forward with their story or not. Because at the end of the day, they're a victim and it's their story and it's their right to choose whether or not they want to share their trauma with the world. I've been seeing a lot of people talk online about like, oh my God, why isn't so-and-so speaking up about what went down on set or what went down behind the scenes? Like, why do you feel entitled to that information? Like, just because it's being highlighted right now and because it is the topic of conversation right now, does not mean that we as the audience, we as the people that are learning this information for the first time, deserve every single aspect of these people's trauma, of their lived experience. Like, how insane does that sound if you're just generally talking about something traumatic that happened and expecting people to relive that trauma for you, for your entertainment and for your clarity? And then they have the nerve to call those people selfish. Like, that is selfish behavior. But all that aside, regardless of whatever else went down, one thing is for sure, and that is that Dan Schneider never needs to work again. He doesn't need to be on a set ever again. And that may be a harsh take, but I feel like after the decades and decades of repeated behavior, I personally feel like he's shown well enough that he is not fit to be in these positions on a personal level. Whether or not he makes hit shows is regardless, because he has made really popular shows, but everything that's gone on behind the scenes, whether it be for the cast, the crew, or even the viewers, based on things that he would put in his shows, it's just generally all detrimental. Like, the adult and sexual innuendos that would be littered throughout his shows are ridiculous and really leads you to ask, like, who is this for? Like, who are these jokes? Who are these like little nods for, you know? Because we're gonna get into this a little bit later, but like in his like PR interview where he's trying to address everything, he's like, these were jokes made for kids, like they're made for kids, but now that the kids are grown up, the adults are finding issues with it. Like, let me just stop you right there, sir. While yes, mature or adult innuendos or jokes are littered throughout all forms of media, even in media that's meant to be for younger people. And if you look and revisit some of your favorite shows and movies that you watched growing up as a kid, you're gonna catch some of those things. They are nowhere near the frequency or the intensity of the ones that were placed in Dan Schneider shows. Like, from feet to sexualizing young girls, to phallic imagery, to graphic innuendos. And a lot of that stuff could just be describing one show, Victorious. Because while Victorious wasn't highlighted a bunch in the docuseries, a lot of the discourse and a lot of the more risque things happening to the cast that don't have to do with inappropriate relations between an adult and a minor came from Victorious, from all the different innuendos, from the different uncomfortable scenes, especially from the extra clips from the slap where you'd have different members of the cast. Usually the girls make these really suggestive comments and be in these really suggestive skits. I know that Ariana Grande's character Kat Valentine had a lot of these, and a lot of them have gone viral and have been included in the docuseries, but rewatching them now, they're just bad. Like, I don't even think when I was initially watching them as a kid, I was like, oh wow, this is funny. I think I remember myself being like, oh, okay, that was weird. Like, what is this? Why is this happening, you know? And there are so many video clips online of the Victorious cast, the iCarly cast, just being generally uncomfortable and guarded whenever Dan Schneider shows up with his little camera recording clips. Like, they look visibly uncomfortable and like they don't want to be around him. And it really makes you wonder why. Now that we mentioned his name enough, let's talk about the Dan Schneider apology video. I don't even know if I can call it an apology video, but more of like Dan Schneider breaks his silence type beat. Because This whole thing felt so strange to me. I've seen a lot of other reactions to his response, and specifically the reaction from Alexa Nicholas, who was both in the docuseries and has previously worked with Dan Schneider on Zoe 101. But this whole response just seemed so strange to me because it gave PR, I'm going to address this on my own terms. And I feel like when allegations of this type are brought up against you, you should not necessarily try and control the narrative as freely. Like, you should try and clear things up in a very fair way. And I don't feel like this apology that he was doing was necessarily that. Because for one, he chose not to go on the docuseries itself to address the public, to address the victims of him in the workplace that he would create. He decided to go on his own YouTube channel and be interviewed by one of his own old actors, who was a grown adult the entire time that they worked together, to sit down and interview him 60 minutes style about the things that had been brought up against him in the docuseries that he could have been a part of and address those things in. It just he can control the narrative however way he wants. And of course, like any good apology video, the comments for the video are turned off. And while I feel like the guy that interviewed him, who played T-Bone on iCarly, it did offer some interesting questions. A lot of Dan Schneider's answers kind of deflected the blame on like this past self, his old mistakes, other people around him that didn't stop him, energy, which makes it seem that it was either a one-time thing or like a couple of time thing that happened that he wasn't proud of but would never do again, or like he just simply did not have as much control over the situation as people claim him to, and it's actually someone else's fault that he ran with these ideas, which both of these just really aren't the case. When in reality, these problematic behaviors and the hostile work environment that he allegedly would create had been going on for decades. Like, it was not just a one-time thing. It was not just something that happened every now and again whenever he get tired. Like, no, that was the consistent way that he had run his workplace for decades. So the apology kind of fell flat because, like, I don't think "I'm sorry, I'm so embarrassed" is going to account for decades worth of trauma and generations of kids that need therapy, have gone through treacherous things, you know? And one point that Alexa brings up is that this apology that he's issuing should not be so public, or at least the first apology that the child actors are getting should be so public. Like, again, he'd been doing this for decades. It's been a while since these shows have wrapped airing. If he really felt this bad about everything, he has had plenty of time to reach out personally to these people that he's affected to apologize and give a genuine apology. But it seems like in this case, he only really cares enough to apologize and take accountability when he gets called out on a large enough scale to where he kind of has to. And something else that kind of bothered me about this interview, the interviewer, like, he was giving Schneider a lot of grace. And he mentioned a couple times that in his experience, he thought that all the cast felt comfortable around Schneider, and he himself didn't really pick up on the things that people have been saying in the docuseries and have been saying online. And to that, I say, again, he was an adult the entire time on set. If all the other adults either did not know or were complicit in the stuff that was happening to these kids, what makes you think that he would be any different? If the kids are saying that they were impacted, that they feel this type of way, talk to them, listen to their opinion, because they are the least protected and the most vulnerable people on that set. And in regards to the stuff where they're talking about jokes again, talking about like how the jokes were made to be friendly and funny to kids, and if they weren't funny or appropriate to kids, they would have and should have taken those episodes off air. But my thing is, I feel like the point is being missed. I don't think it's about necessarily cutting the jokes now 10, 20 years down the line. It's the fact and the principle that the jokes were there in the first place, you know? Like, these jokes and bits that were made for kids, if they go over kids' heads and the kids aren't able to really understand what the joke is actually meant to be, then guess what? The intended audience of that joke is not for kids. If the joke goes over the intended audience's head, that is not the intended audience. Meaning that these jokes weren't made for them. It was not an adult writing kids' jokes for kids. It was an adult writing adult-coded jokes for a kids' show that were primarily to be caught and understood the first time by adults, because they have that context and are able to understand what visually is being implied. I took this comms class in college where we talked about conscious and subconscious stimuli, basically how in like marketing and promotion and visual materials and entertainment and just in the world, there's a direct message that an ad or a piece of media is trying to display to you, and then there's that subconscious stimuli, that subconscious aspect of that media that isn't explicitly stated but is understood based on like whether those be visual cues, colors, symbols, images, to get a point or a message across without having to explicitly say it, even though sometimes the jokes in these shows would closely explicitly say it. Like, while yes, that clip of Ariana Grande trying to squeeze a potato and get the juice out of a potato may just seem innocent and like she's just trying to juice a potato, the subconscious mind of that image and that objective can be applied elsewhere, and that's just messed up. And also, shout out to me finally using my degree. But another thing that I was kind of shocked that they didn't necessarily touch on in the interview, well, I don't know if I'm necessarily shocked because I don't know why I would expect them to really get into that, but one thing that the doc really touched on was how race played a factor on these shows and behind the scenes on these shows, specifically how Dan Schneider would kind of be distant and colder towards the actors of color, the people of color on set, than he would be for their white counterparts. Like, he talked a little bit about like how he wishes he was better to people as a whole, but addressing that more specifically would have been nice, because is that any different? Because you brought a black man who has been beloved for being kind of like a meme slash fan favorite from an iCarly show to basically defend you and clear up your image. But you know, that's neither here nor there. This whole situation is just so messed up. Like, it's been messed up from the time that everything has been taking place, even to now. Like, new things are unfolding day by day. Like, people are coming out with their own stories, people are coming out with clarifications, and it really just brings us to the greater conversation of child actors in Hollywood and the fact that they have historically just been so underprotected and cared for in terms of just general safety and well-being. Like, a recent testimony from a former child actor, Amber Frank, who was on another show on Nickelodeon, has given more context talking about other really messed up things that have happened while she was working at Nickelodeon that were inappropriate for children. And it's just a lack of accountability overall. Like, while people can say that things have gotten better, things have improved with time, there's still, again, a whole generation of people that have been impacted by this, and there's been no accountability taken to mend these relationships and to give justice to these people. And we can only really hope that things are better now. And again, even if they aren't, I hope that we hear about it and things can be done about it now, as opposed to too far in the future where it could be just generally too late. But yeah, that's pretty much what I want to talk about in this video, y'all. I didn't want to get too deep in this. I just wanted to really get these thoughts off my chest. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Have you seen Quiet on Set? We've been looped into this general controversy. Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comments section below. Let's have a conversation down there talking about this. Again, thanks so much for watching. If you like this content, then consider subscribing and leaving a like. Follow me on my socials. But other than that, y'all, I have Imurgency, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.